By the spring of 1453, Constantinople stood like a lone flame, flickering in the darkness of 1,000 years of history. Once the heart of the mighty Byzantine Empire, successor to Rome itself, it now clung to life in the face of a world transformed. The empire had shrunk to little more than the city, a handful of small territories, and the will of its people. The city's massive Theodosian walls, triple lines of stone and mortar stretching nearly 4 miles, had repelled countless sieges since the 5th century. They had turned aside Goths, Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and even Crusaders. Though in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, the city had fallen to Latin Christians in a betrayal that still scarred the Byzantine soul. Inside those walls, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos prepared for the coming storm. He was a man of grim resolve, aware that he ruled the last fragment of an empire that had once stretched across the Mediterranean. Yet he knew he would not surrender Constantinople without a fight worthy of the emperors before him. The Sultan's dream across the Bosporus in the city of Edirne, a 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan prepared to end the Roman Empire forever. Mehmed II, known already among his people as the Conqueror in anticipation of his ambitions, had studied warfare since boyhood. Fluent in several languages, skilled in administration, and ruthless in ambition, he was determined to make Constantinople the jewel of his empire. For centuries, the Ottomans had pushed into Byzantine lands, surrounding Constantinople on all sides. Now Mehmed sought the final blow. He had ordered the casting of massive cannons, monsters of bronze capable of hurling stone balls weighing over half a ton. The largest, designed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban, could fire projectiles that shattered stone like clay. Mehmed's advisors warned him that the city would be hard to take. He answered simply, "Either I will take this city, or this city will take me." The defenders of the Cross Constantine XI had little to work with. His defenders numbered perhaps 7,000, Byzantine soldiers, local militia, and a small but elite force of Genoese mercenaries under the command of Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a master of siege defense. Giustiniani brought not only seasoned men-at-arms, but also expertise in reinforcing walls and organizing artillery. The defenders' greatest advantage was the Golden Horn, the sheltered harbor north of the city. A massive chain thick as a man's arm stretched across its entrance, preventing enemy ships from entering. The Byzantine navy, though small, was well trained in defending these waters. And yet, everyone inside the city knew the truth. If the Ottomans broke the land walls or breached the harbor, Constantinople would fall. The calm before the storm. In early April 1453, Ottoman forces began to arrive in waves. Campfires multiplied across the horizon, their smoke rising like black pillars by day, and their flames flickering like stars by night. Soon the full host was assembled, perhaps 80,000 men, including elite janissaries, cavalry, artillery crews, and siege engineers. From the towers of Constantinople, the defenders watched in silence as the Ottomans built siege lines, dug trenches, and positioned their great cannons. The city's churches were filled with the sound of prayer and chanting. Priests carried icons through the streets, blessing soldiers and citizens alike. On April 6th, Mehmed sent his first message to the emperor. "Surrender the city, and your people will be spared." Constantine's reply was calm and final. "To surrender the city to you is not mine to give, or theirs to take who live in it. We are all resolved to die, and will not spare our lives." The first thunder of the Great Bombard. The next morning, the silence shattered. From the Ottoman lines came a deep, earth-shaking roar. The Great Bombard had spoken. A massive stone ball slammed into the outer wall, sending chunks of masonry flying and dust billowing into the air. The defenders rushed to repair the damage, working under a hail of arrows and musket fire. The cannon would fire only a few times a day. It took hours to reload, but each shot was like a hammer striking an ancient anvil. With every thunderous impact, the city's fate inched closer. As the sun set, both armies prepared for the long siege ahead. Inside Constantinople, candles flickered in the darkened streets, and the scent of incense mingled with the acrid tang of gunpowder. Outside, the Ottoman drums began to beat. a low, steady rhythm that would echo in the ears of the defenders for weeks to come. From April 6, 1453, the siege began in earnest. Ottoman drums beat in an unending rhythm, deep, resonant, like the heartbeat of an approaching giant. The Great Bombard and its smaller cousins hurled their stone balls against the ancient Theodosian walls, sending tremors through the city. Every strike tore away centuries-old stone, each breach hastily filled by defenders working through day and night. The Ottomans made camp on all sides except the north, where the Golden Horn offered a sheltered harbor. The great chain across its entrance was a formidable barrier, and the Byzantine fleet, small but fiercely loyal, patrolled the waters, ensuring no enemy ship could pass. Mehmed knew the city could never fall while the harbor remained in Byzantine hands. The genius of Giustiniani. In the critical Mesotachion sector of the walls stood Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, the Genoese commander whose reputation for defense was unmatched. Under his leadership, the walls were shored up with earthworks to absorb cannon impact. Behind each breach, wooden palisades were erected as fallback points. Giustiniani was tireless, moving from bastion to bastion, rallying his men and personally directing repairs. The defenders were a patchwork of Byzantines, Genoese, Venetians, and even a handful of Catalans. They spoke different tongues but were united by desperation. They knew this was the last stand of Christian Constantinople. The Sultan's Gambit. For days, Mehmed pounded the land walls but made little headway. Then in late April, he devised a plan that stunned the defenders. If the chain barred his ships from the Golden Horn, he would simply bypass it. In one of the most audacious feats of the siege, Ottoman galleys were hauled overland on greased wooden rollers, dragged by oxen and men across the hills of Galata, and launched into the Golden Horn behind the defensive chain. When dawn broke, the defenders saw Ottoman banners on ships inside the harbor, a shock that struck as deep as any cannonball. Now the city was besieged from both land and sea, assault and counter-assault. With ships in the Golden Horn, Mehmed's forces attacked on two fronts. The defenders fought with desperate ingenuity, dropping barrels of quicklime to blind attackers, using Greek fire to set enemy ships ablaze, and lashing down wooden mantlets to absorb arrow fire. The Janissaries, the elite corps of the Ottoman army, launched repeated assaults on the breaches. Each time they were repelled, often at horrific cost. The walls became slick with blood, and the air thick with the smell of smoke and the cries of the wounded. At night, both sides worked feverishly, one to undermine and topple the walls, the other to rebuild and fortify them before morning. Priests walked the ramparts, blessing the soldiers and lifting high icons of the Virgin Mary, believed to be the city's divine protector. The breaking point. By late May, Constantinople was crumbling. Food supplies dwindled, disease spread, and exhaustion gnawed at the defenders. Emperor Constantine XI himself took to the walls, fighting alongside common soldiers. He was seen in battered armor, sword in hand, moving from the Blockernai Palace to the battered gates, giving courage where words were no longer enough. On the night of May 28th, Mehmed ordered a final assault for the next dawn. The city's churches were filled with people, Byzantines, Latins, and foreigners alike, praying together in what they knew might be their last night on earth. The Hagia Sophia glowed with candlelight as hymns rose into the darkness. Outside the walls, the Ottomans lit thousands of torches, turning the night into a sea of fire. The air was tense, heavy with the knowledge that the centuries-old Christian stronghold was about to face its ultimate trial. May 29th, 1453. Before the sun rose, the fate of Constantinople was sealed in the stillness of that final night. Inside the walls, men and women embraced for the last time. Priests led processions through the torchlit streets, carrying sacred icons, blessing warriors and children alike. Latin and Orthodox Christians, long divided by bitter schism, stood together in prayer within the Hagia Sophia. Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, donned his armor, not the gilded ceremonial kind of a ruler, but the battered steel of a soldier. He rode to the walls and addressed his troops in a voice that carried over the rumble of Ottoman drums. My brothers, today we fight for the faith, for the city, and for our families. This is our hour to stand, for there will be no other. The first wave. At the break of dawn, The Ottoman artillery unleashed a final barrage. The Great Bombard roared, and the stone balls smashed into weakened sections of the Theodosian walls. Smoke and dust filled the air. The first wave of attackers surged forward, irregular troops sent to exhaust the defenders. They stormed the breaches, ladders scraping against stone, arrows whistling overhead. The defenders hurled them back with sword, spear, and boiling pitch. Bodies piled at the base of the walls. Giustiniani's Genoese fought like lions, holding the critical Mesotikion sector. But they knew the worst was yet to come. The Janissaries marched after the first wave withdrew. The Janissaries advanced in perfect order. These were Mehmed's elite soldiers, disciplined, fearless, and utterly loyal. They moved with the rhythm of the drums, shields interlocked, muskets and bows raining fire. They pressed hard at the breaches, forcing Giustiniani's men back step by step. Giustiniani himself was wounded by an arrow or shot, accounts differ, and was carried from the walls. His departure sent ripples of panic through the defenders. Constantine, realizing the danger, moved to the front lines, rallying his soldiers personally. The emperor's last stand. The third and final assault came with overwhelming force. Janissaries at the center, Anatolian troops on the flanks, and supporting fire from the harbor. A gate known as the Kirkaporta, perhaps left unsecured in the chaos, became a fatal opening. Ottoman soldiers poured through, spreading behind the defenders and sowing confusion. Constantine XI fought on foot, striking at enemies until he vanished into the crush of battle. His body was never definitively found. Some say he threw off his imperial regalia, so he would die as a common soldier, indistinguishable from his men. By mid-morning, the walls were lost. The Ottomans flooded into the city. Hagia Sophia falls. As fighting raged in the streets, thousands of citizens sought refuge in the Hagia Sophia. Its vast dome echoed with chants and prayers. Outside, the sound of iron-shod boots grew louder. When the great doors were smashed open, Ottoman soldiers streamed in. Some seized treasures, others rounded up captives. The ancient cathedral, once the pride of Christendom, was claimed for Islam. Mehmed II himself would soon arrive, order its conversion into a mosque, and ensure its survival as one of the world's great monuments. The aftermath. For 3 days, the city was given over to the traditional spoils of conquest. Many were killed, others were enslaved. When order was restored, Mehmed entered the city in triumph, riding through its shattered gates. He stood in the Hagia Sophia and gave thanks for his victory. Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was no more. Its 1,000-year reign ended in a single day. Yet its legacy would echo through the centuries in art, scholarship, and the faith carried by its exiles. The fall of Constantinople was not just the end of a city, it was the final death of the Roman Empire and the dawn of a new world order. The walls that had stood for a millennium could not withstand the march of time, the roar of cannons, and the will of a young sultan whose star was only beginning to rise.